You're exhausted, aren't you? Not just physically, but spiritually. You follow the rules, you help others. You put their needs before your own. You were taught that being good means sacrificing yourself, that kindness will be rewarded, that honesty always wins. But deep down, in that place you rarely acknowledge, you're starting to realize something disturbing. The world doesn't seem to reward the good. It rewards the strategic. Think about it. Who holds the power? Who commands respect? Who gets what they want? Is it the kindest people you know? Or is it those who understand how power actually works? Who know when to be generous and when to be firm? When to speak and when to remain silent? When to forgive and when to enforce consequences? The uncomfortable truth is that pure, unrestrained goodness, the kind that turns the other cheek, that gives without limits, that never says no, doesn't thrive in our world. It gets exploited, ignored, and eventually crushed. This isn't a modern problem. It's been this way throughout history. A man who wishes to make a profession of goodness in everything must necessarily come to grief among so many who are not good. These aren't my words. They were written by Niccolo Machiavelli nearly 500 years ago, and they cut to the heart of a painful reality many good people face daily. When we hear the name Machiavelli, most of us think of cruel manipulation, of the phrase, "the ends justify the means." But that's a profound misunderstanding of what Machiavelli was really trying to tell us. He wasn't teaching us to be evil. He was showing us how to be effectively good in a world that doesn't reward naive virtue. Today we're going to explore the forbidden truth that Machiavelli discovered, why pure goodness fails, why strategic goodness succeeds, and how you can maintain your moral core while navigating a world that often punishes those who play by the rules. By the end, you'll understand not just why good people suffer, but how they can thrive without losing their soul. First, we need to understand why pure goodness so often leads to exploitation. Think about someone you know who's genuinely kind, perhaps too kind for their own good. Maybe it's a coworker who gets stuck doing everyone else's tasks, a friend who's always available when others need help, but gets ignored when they need support, or even yourself. These people aren't being targeted randomly. Research in social psychology has identified specific behavioral patterns that signal exploitability: excessive agreeableness, visible discomfort with conflict, eagerness to please, inability to say no, and a tendency to trust without verification. The very traits we associate with goodness become targets on their backs. Studies have repeatedly shown that manipulative individuals actively scan for these traits. They don't try their tactics with everyone. They specifically target those who've shown they won't push back. This is what psychologists call selective exploitation, and it operates everywhere from office politics to friendships to romantic relationships. Think about your own experiences. Have you noticed that certain people seem to repeatedly take advantage of your generosity while treating others with respect? Have you ever wondered why the same colleague always dumps their last-minute work on you specifically? Or why certain friends only call when they need something? The pattern is clear and scientifically verified. Those with manipulative tendencies systematically target the most agreeable, conflict-avoidant individuals. A 2018 study found that people scoring high on measures of kindness and cooperation were significantly more likely to be victims of exploitation, not because they deserved it, but because their goodness made them perfect targets. Machiavelli observed this pattern in Renaissance politics. Men are so simple of mind and so dominated by their immediate needs that a deceitful man will always find plenty who are ready to be deceived. He wasn't being cynical. He was describing exactly what modern psychology has now confirmed: that unrestricted goodness without strategic awareness becomes a liability. But this creates a terrible dilemma. If pure goodness leads to exploitation, does that mean we should abandon our values entirely? Should we become as ruthless as those who take advantage of others? Absolutely not. That's where most people misunderstand Machiavelli. When Machiavelli wrote that, It is much safer to be feared than loved. He wasn't advocating for cruelty. He was observing that people are less likely to take advantage of those they believe might impose consequences. Think about it this way. Do manipulative colleagues dump last-minute work on the boss? Do friends who never repay loans try to borrow from people who have firmly called them out before? The insight here isn't to become feared through cruelty. It's to be respected through boundaries. It's to understand that unrestrained kindness without limits actually enables harmful behavior in others. Let me tell you about Michael, a small business owner who prided himself on treating everyone fairly. When a new vendor approached him with a seemingly fantastic offer, Michael accepted on a handshake, paid up front, and never received the promised goods. The vendor had specifically targeted Michael after observing his trusting nature with other business partners. Michael's mistake wasn't being kind. It was failing to protect his kindness with appropriate verification, clear contracts, and consequences for violation. He confused goodness with naivety, fairness with blind trust. His experience mirrors what countless good people discover too late. That virtue without strategy becomes victimhood. This brings us to one of Machiavelli's most profound insights. In The Prince, he writes that a leader must know how to use both the nature of the law and the nature of force. The law is proper to humans, force to animals. But, he continues, since the first is often insufficient, one must have recourse to the second. In other words, principles are human, but sometimes you need the lion's roar to be heard. Think of it this way. If a bully is attacking someone and you intervene with only kind words, you're likely to become another victim. If you intervene with appropriate force, whether physical in that scenario or metaphorical in others, you can actually stop the harm. True goodness isn't just about intentions, it's about effectiveness. Machiavelli understood something revolutionary. In a world where not everyone plays by the rules, playing only by the rules ensures your defeat. This isn't an argument for abandoning ethics. It's an argument for protecting ethics with strategy. The most ethical doctors don't just have good intentions, they have effective treatments. The most ethical teachers don't just care about students, they know how to manage a classroom. The most ethical leaders don't just want what's best, they know how to make it happen in a complex, often resistant world. But here's where many good people fall into a trap. They believe their goodness should be obvious to everyone, that their hard work, kindness, and integrity will naturally be recognized and rewarded. Machiavelli identified this dangerous assumption centuries before modern psychology studied it. Everyone sees what you appear to be, few experience what you really are, he wrote, identifying what we now call the perception paradox. The fact that how you present yourself often matters more than your actual abilities or contributions. This creates a particular challenge for kind people who often downplay their achievements, qualify their statements to avoid seeming arrogant, give credit to others while taking none themselves, and speak less assertively than their less ethical counterparts. Think about your workplace. Have you ever watched someone less competent but more confident get opportunities you deserved? Have you ever had your ideas ignored until someone more assertive repeated them? Have you ever worked twice as hard as others only to see them promoted based on perception rather than performance? Modern research confirms what Machiavelli observed. Studies show that people who display confident body language are rated as more competent than those with identical qualifications but humbler demeanor. One landmark study found that perception of competence often outweighs actual competence in determining who gets hired and promoted. The cruel irony is that this humility, while virtuous, often prevents kind people from gaining the influence needed to actually do good in the world. What use is your compassion if you're never in a position to apply it meaningfully? Consider Eleanor Roosevelt's transformation. Initially a shy, insecure political wife, she consciously developed what her biographer called her public voice, a more authoritative presentation style that ultimately helped her become one of history's most influential humanitarian figures. Did this strategic self-presentation make her less authentic? No, it made her kindness more effective. The vital lesson here isn't to become an empty self-promoter, but to recognize that perception management isn't inherently manipulative. It's a necessary skill for ensuring your virtues actually have impact. To protect your kindness, you must learn to present it effectively. This means speaking with confidence when offering help. It means taking appropriate credit for your contributions. It means ensuring your boundaries are clearly communicated through both words and body language. Remember, if people perceive you as weak rather than kind, as a doormat rather than a good person, they will treat you accordingly, and your ability to do good in the world will be diminished. There's another dimension to this strategic goodness that Machiavelli understood deeply: emotional self-mastery. Machiavelli believed that the ability to control one's emotional reactions was essential for maintaining power and influence. Not because emotions are wrong, but because visible reactivity gives others a strategic advantage over you. Think about Alex, whose business partner betrayed him by taking their biggest client and half their staff. Alex's immediate reaction was rage, but instead of lashing out, he took 3 days before responding. When he finally called a meeting with remaining staff, he was calm, focused, and strategic. "I was screaming inside," he later confided, "but I knew showing that would only make things worse." Within a year, Alex had rebuilt his company stronger than before. Meanwhile, his former partner's hastily assembled operation collapsed amid conflict and poor planning. When they ran into each other years later, Alex's former partner said something revealing. "I never thought you'd recover. You were always too nice." What his partner had mistaken for weakness was actually tremendous strength. The emotional self-mastery to feel deeply while choosing how and when to express those feelings. Think about your own emotional responses when someone takes advantage of your kindness. Do you immediately show hurt or anger? Do you find yourself reacting emotionally in ways that ultimately reduce your effectiveness? Machiavelli understood that emotional self-regulation is essential for anyone who wants to maintain influence. Not because emotions are wrong, but because uncontrolled emotions can be exploited. Consider how differently people respond to controlled versus uncontrolled emotions. When you respond with visible hurt, they learn they can manipulate you through emotional pressure. When you explode in anger, they feel justified in dismissing you as unstable or overreacting. When you maintain composure, they must engage with your actual position rather than your emotions. This doesn't mean becoming cold or unfeeling. It means developing what Machiavelli might call emotional fortitude, the ability to feel deeply while controlling how and when you express those feelings. Modern research confirms the advantage this provides. Studies show that emotional self-regulation is a stronger predictor of success than technical skill in most professional contexts. This is particularly relevant for kind people who often experience emotions more intensely due to their empathetic nature. Abraham Lincoln demonstrated this principle during America's most divisive period. Known for writing what he called hot letters, expressing his anger in messages he never sent, Lincoln processed emotions without letting them dictate his actions. His secretary described finding letters so scorching that the very paper seemed to burn, yet marked "never sent, too strong." Did this emotional discipline make Lincoln less authentic? No. It made him more effective at preserving the Union while eventually ending slavery. His kindness and compassion, protected by strategic emotional management, changed history. The path to intelligent kindness requires developing this same capacity, feeling fully while expressing strategically. This isn't emotional suppression, but strategic emotional expression, crucial for maintaining both kindness and effectiveness in a complex world. There's yet another dimension of strategic goodness that many kind people miss entirely, what Machiavelli called strategic distance. Men are less hesitant about harming someone who makes himself loved than someone who makes himself feared. Machiavelli observed, recognizing a fundamental truth about human psychology. We value what is scarce and often take for granted what is abundantly available. Think about your own relationships. Have you noticed that the people whose time and attention are hardest to get often receive the most respect? Have you found that those to whom you make yourself constantly available sometimes value you least? This creates a painful dilemma for kind people. The natural impulse to be constantly available often leads to being taken for granted. Yet, withdrawing feels selfish or manipulative. The solution isn't becoming cold or aloof, but developing what anthropologists call calculated distance, the strategic management of your accessibility to others. This isn't about playing games. It's about valuing yourself enough to create sustainable boundaries. Research confirms this counterintuitive principle. Studies show that people who maintain certain boundaries in relationships are actually perceived as having higher status and receive more respect than those who are indiscriminately available. This applies in friendships, romantic relationships, and professional contexts. Franklin D. Roosevelt, known for his warm public persona, carefully managed access to himself. His biographer describes how he compartmentalized relationships and information, never making himself too available to any one person or group. This strategic distance didn't diminish people's affection for him. It enhanced their respect. For genuinely kind individuals, strategic distance isn't about manipulation, but sustainability. Research from Stanford Center for Compassion shows that maintaining boundaries is essential for preventing compassion fatigue, the exhaustion that comes from giving without limits. Consider these practical applications. Don't answer every message immediately unless truly urgent. Schedule specific times for helping others rather than dropping everything. Be fully present when you do give your time, but limit its quantity. Allow others to miss you occasionally. Don't volunteer for every need that arises. The challenge is cultivating what we might call compassionate distance, caring deeply while maintaining boundaries that preserve your energy and increase the value of your engagement. This isn't selfishness, but strategic kindness, ensuring your generosity remains sustainable and appreciated. By now, you might be wondering, if I implement these strategies, am I still a good person? Or am I becoming manipulative like those I've criticized? This is a profound question, and it brings us to the heart of Machiavelli's most misunderstood lesson. Machiavelli wasn't advocating for amorality. He was advocating for effectiveness in service of your values. He didn't say, abandon morality. He said, understand that morality without effectiveness leads to defeat, and sometimes effectiveness requires strategies that seem, on the surface, to contradict pure moral idealism. Think about it this way. A parent who never disciplines a child isn't being kind. They're failing in their duty. A friend who enables destructive behavior isn't being supportive. They're being complicit. A leader who refuses to make hard decisions isn't being gentle. They're being negligent. True goodness isn't about adherence to simplistic moral rules. It's about creating positive outcomes in a complex world. Sometimes that requires strategic thinking that pure moralists might question. But the measure of ethics isn't purity of methods. It's the end result for human flourishing. After being passed over for promotion again, David decided to change his approach. Instead of just working harder, he began documenting his achievements in weekly emails to his manager. He practiced saying, I need to check my schedule, instead of automatically saying yes. He spoke up assertively in meetings while still treating others with respect. He built strategic relationships with key decision makers. He learned to disagree professionally when necessary. 6 months later, he got the promotion. I'm still the same person with the same values, he said. I just learned to present myself differently. This is the balanced way, maintaining your kindness while adding the strategic elements necessary for that kindness to thrive and be recognized. It's not about becoming manipulative, but about ensuring your goodness isn't exploited or overlooked. Here are practical strategies you can implement immediately. Principled transparency. Be honest about your boundaries from the beginning. I'd love to help with this project, but I can only dedicate 3 hours this week. Research shows clear boundary setting actually increases respect rather than diminishing it. Response flexibility. Adjust your approach based on who you're dealing with. Be generous with trustworthy friends while requiring reciprocity from those who've proven unreliable. Studies find that successful people vary their interaction styles significantly depending on past experiences with individuals. Strategic positioning. Place yourself where your contributions will be recognized. Volunteer for visible projects. Connect your work to organizational priorities. Share achievements without arrogance. I'm pleased our team's project came in under budget while exceeding targets. Selective vulnerability. Share personal information strategically rather than indiscriminately. Build deeper connections with proven allies while maintaining professional boundaries with those who've shown manipulative tendencies. Pattern recognition. Learn to identify warning signs of exploitation. Does someone only contact you when they need something? Do they reciprocate your generosity? Do they respect your time and boundaries? Adjusting your approach based on these patterns isn't cynical, it's wise. Deliberate discomfort. Practice small acts of assertiveness daily. Dispute an incorrect charge. Ask for what you deserve. Say no to an unreasonable request. Each small victory builds the confidence to protect your kindness in larger contexts. The path of strategic goodness requires balance, combining genuine compassion with strategic awareness. This balance isn't about becoming Machiavellian in the negative sense. It's about ensuring your virtues survive and thrive in environments that might otherwise exploit them to extinction. Imagine a world where the kindest people weren't pushed aside, but rose to positions of influence, where strategic awareness protected compassion rather than replacing it, where Machiavelli's insights were used not to manipulate, but to ensure virtue could thrive. This isn't fantasy. It's entirely possible when we embrace the balanced approach that Machiavelli, properly understood, actually advocated. Remember, Machiavelli wasn't suggesting we abandon kindness. He was teaching us how to make kindness strong enough to survive in a challenging world. The choice now lies before you. Will you continue as you have been, hoping the world will finally recognize and reward your goodness alone? Or will you add strategic awareness to your kindness, making it resilient enough to truly change the world? Strategic goodness isn't just about protecting yourself, though it certainly does that. It's about becoming effective enough in your compassion that you can actually create the kinder world you've always envisioned. The true power of Machiavelli's insights isn't in teaching the cruel how to succeed. It's in teaching the kind how to survive, thrive, and ultimately transform the very environments that once exploited them. That transformation begins with you today, as you take the first steps toward making your kindness not just good, but intelligent. If this message resonated with you, if you want deeper insights into psychology, power, and human behavior, subscribe to the channel, challenge yourself, rise above, become more. Like this video, share it with people who need to hear these truths, and let me know in the comments. Did you ever have a moment when you realized your kindness was being exploited? How did you respond? Let's talk about it.